Brandon, a dedicated police officer, finds a frail 6-year-old girl in a corner of a shopping mall parking lot, saying that her mother doesn't want her at home anymore. Imagine a bustling city, with people rushing from one place to another, each immersed in their own thoughts and worries. While on his routine patrol at the mall, Brandon, a dedicated and committed police officer, walks attentively, observing every detail, when suddenly something catches his attention. In an isolated corner of the parking lot, he spots a little girl sitting alone, tightly hugging a small backpack. She appears to be only 6 years old, and her delicate face is marked by sadness. Intrigued and concerned about the situation, Brandon slowly approaches the girl. As he gets closer, he notices that she is crying softly, with swollen and reddened eyes, indicating that she had already shed many tears. Brandon kneels down to be at her level and, with a gentle and welcoming voice, introduces himself. "Yeah, hi, my name is Brandon. What's yours?" The girl, in an almost inaudible voice, replies, I'm Zoe." Brandon, with a kind smile, asks who Zoe is with at the mall. To his surprise, she reveals that she is completely alone. With a deep sadness etched on her angelic face, Zoe says, My mom doesn't love me anymore, she doesn't want me at home." These words hit Brandon like an arrow straight to his heart. He can't imagine what could lead a mother to reject her own daughter in such a way. Trying to better understand the situation, Brandon asks if Zoe's mother knows that she is there, alone in that mall. The girl shakes her head, confirming that her mother has no idea of her whereabouts. Brandon then strives to comfort Zoe, gently asking, Why do you think your mom doesn't love you? How could anyone not want such a beautiful and special girl like you at home?" Upon hearing these words, Zoe lowers her head, and tears begin to flow down her delicate face once again. Brandon, with a heavy heart, asks if she is hungry. Zoe timidly says no, as she had eaten a piece of pizza that she found in the trash, discarded by someone. She opens her worn-out backpack and shows a piece of sandwich, kept as if it were a precious treasure. This scene brings back painful memories from Brandon's own past. He remembers when his father abandoned the family, leaving them in a desperate financial situation. His mother, unemployed and without prospects, found herself forced to take him, along with his younger brother, to rummage through the neighbors' trash in search of scraps of food. The pain of hunger and humiliation is something Brandon has never forgotten, and that memory still burns in his soul. Sitting next to Zoe, Brandon tries to process the entire situation. He thinks about the girl's mother, imagining the despair she must be feeling without knowing her daughter's whereabouts, exposed to so many dangers in such a large and unpredictable city. After all, Brandon is also the father of a 6-year-old girl, and the idea of losing sight of her for even a second fills him with dread. Suddenly, Zoe stands up and moves away a little, as if she were about to run away. Brandon, on impulse, rushes to catch up with her and asks, with concern, where she is going. I need to go to the bathroom, she replies shyly. Brandon is intrigued, as Zoe seems to know exactly where the bathroom is, which makes him suspect that perhaps she has been wandering around there for longer than he had imagined. Zoe enters the women's bathroom, and Brandon waits patiently outside. Moments later, she returns, with an expression of discomfort on her face, and says that there is no toilet paper in the bathroom. Brandon finds himself facing a dilemma, as the bathroom belongs to the supermarket, and he is not authorized to touch the supplies. But then an idea occurs to him, to check if there is paper in the men's bathroom. He quickly enters, finds a roll of toilet paper, and, relieved, returns to where Zoe is waiting for him. When Zoe comes out of the bathroom, she rummages through her backpack and grabs an empty water bottle. With pleading eyes, she asks Brandon to fill it up at the water fountain across the hall. At this moment, Brandon realizes that Zoe already feels more comfortable with his presence, as if he were a safe haven amidst that chaotic situation. On the way to the water fountain, Brandon takes the opportunity to ask strategic questions, seeking to obtain information that can help him take Zoe back home. He asks for her mother's full name, if the school Zoe attends is close to her residence, and jots down every relevant detail in his notepad, hoping to piece together a puzzle that will lead him to the girl's family. When they reach the water fountain, Brandon fills Zoe's bottle, and she drinks the water with a desperate thirst, as if she hadn't been properly hydrated for a long time. Brandon, noticing the girl's fragility, takes the bottle again and fills it to the brim. Then, he makes a special invitation. Zoe, how about we have a little snack? You know, I'm starving too. In fact, Brandon knows that the girl must be famished, and his heart aches thinking about what she must have already gone through. To his surprise, Zoe gives a shy smile and nods her head, accepting the invitation. From that moment on, a remarkable transformation takes place. That quiet and sad girl turns into a tireless chatterbox, talking about her favorite games, the cartoons she likes the most, and her unconditional love for drawing and coloring. Brandon listens attentively, hoping that she will mention something about her mother and the reason she thinks she is not loved, but Zoe seems lost in her own little world, as if, at that moment, nothing else matters besides Brandon's comforting company. Looking at his watch, Brandon realizes that more than an hour has passed since he started talking to Zoe. He knows he needs to find a way to reassure the girl's family as soon as possible. So, with great care, he excuses himself and says he needs to make an important call, gently asking Zoe to continue enjoying her snack while he steps away for a few moments. Brandon moves away a little and starts searching the internet for information about the school mentioned by Zoe, hoping that it will lead him to her parents. However, to his frustration, there is no record of a school with that name in the vicinity. Discouraged, he returns to the table where Zoe is, but something catches his attention. In the girl's hands, there is a crumpled photograph, and Brandon realizes that it could be the key to unraveling the entire mystery. Cautiously, Brandon approaches Zoe and asks who the people in the photo are. With a nostalgic smile, the girl replies, That's my dad, that's my mom, that's me, and that's my little brother." Brandon, with his heart racing, asks to take a closer look at the photo. Upon analyzing it, he notices that Zoe is in her father's arms, while the mother holds a newborn baby. The photo seems recent, as Zoe appears to be the same age as she is now. With the photograph in hand, Brandon feels a wave of relief wash over his body. Now, he has a concrete clue to find Zoe's family. He is absolutely certain that the girl's parents must have already contacted the police to start the search. Without wasting time, Brandon takes a picture of the image with his cell phone and sends it to a colleague in the police intelligence unit, along with a message explaining the entire situation. While anxiously awaiting news, Brandon continues talking to Zoe, trying to keep her calm and comfortable. He asks if she likes her parents, and the girl responds affirmatively, with a sincere smile on her lips. However, when Brandon mentions the issue of Zoe thinking that her mother doesn't want her, the girl's smile fades, giving way to an expression of deep sadness. Brandon, with all the care and sensitivity, asks Zoe to tell him the reason for thinking that way. He knows he needs to hear the whole story in order to help her in the best possible way. Zoe, with a choked voice and teary eyes, begins to open up. My dad left home. Now he has a new family and lives far away from here. Since he left, he has never seen or looked for me again, Zoe reveals, with a maturity that doesn't match her 6 years of age. These words hit Brandon like a punch to the stomach. He knows all too well the pain of growing up without a father's presence, and his heart aches imagining the suffering of that little girl. Zoe continues her story, telling that after her father's departure, she, her mother, and her little brother moved to their grandmother's house. The mother couldn't bear living in the old house anymore, as everything there brought painful memories of her absent husband. However, living with the grandmother was not easy either. The two were in constant friction, and Zoe ended up suffering the emotional consequences of these endless fights. With tears streaming down her little face, Zoe confesses that sometimes she had to miss school because the arguments between her mother and grandmother would extend late into the night. The girl reveals an overwhelming fear that her grandmother will also abandon her, just as her father did. After all, he and her mother used to fight all the time until one day, after a particularly intense argument, her father left, never to return. Zoe goes on, recounting that one day, her mother picked her up from school with eyes swollen from crying. She announced that they would be returning to their old house because she had another nasty fight with the grandmother. Zoe, with her characteristic innocence, asked if the two didn't love each other, since they were in constant conflict. The mother, with a tired sigh, replied that even when people love each other, they also fight. However, she refused to tell the reason for the argument, claiming that Zoe was still too young to understand the complex problems of adults. Despite everything, Zoe was happy to return to the home she knew. There was her cozy room, her beloved toys, and the prospect of not missing any more classes or having to listen to the daily fights between her mother and grandmother. However, after the move, Zoe's mother became distant and emotionally unavailable. She no longer played with her daughter and spent hours on end staring at her cell phone. Zoe tried to strike up a conversation, but her mother was always too busy to pay attention to her. With her voice choked with tears, Zoe reveals a secret she kept under lock and key. One night, she accidentally overheard a phone conversation between her mother and father. The mother poured out her heart, crying that she couldn't stand being locked up at home with two children anymore. She said that she had never wanted to be a mother and that her husband had abandoned her with this immense responsibility. The mother lamented that since the birth of Zoe and her brother, her life had lost its meaning. She begged the father to come back and take the children, as she wanted the freedom to travel, go out with friends, and come home without having to deal with the constant noise and demands of the children. Hearing those words was like a stab in Zoe's heart. She felt rejected, unwanted, and guilty for supposedly ruining her mother's life. With a heavy heart and a mind in turmoil, Zoe decided at that moment that she would do her mother a favor. She gathered her most precious belongings in her worn-out backpack and left, without looking back, imagining that this way, her mother would be happier having to take care of only her younger brother. After all, one child is less work than two, right? Zoe looks at Brandon with pleading eyes, waiting for an answer, a consolation, anything to ease the pain she carries in her chest. Brandon is stunned by the maturity and depth of the story of this 6-year-old girl. The mother's words were like poison, corroding Zoe's self-esteem and sense of self-worth. Brandon knows he needs to find the right words to comfort that shattered little heart. With all the gentleness in the world, Brandon says, Zoe, sweetheart, I understand your pain. I can imagine how much you must be hurting inside. But, you know, when adults are very tired and overwhelmed, they end up saying things without thinking straight. Things that often hurt those they love the most. At that moment, Brandon's cell phone vibrates. It's his colleague from the police intelligence unit, informing him that they have already located Zoe's mother, and that she is on her way to the police station at that very moment. Brandon feels immense relief knowing that the girl's mother is okay and that soon the two will be reunited. Brandon turns to Zoe and, with a welcoming smile, asks if she would like to go back home. The girl, with tears in her eyes, nods her head affirmatively. Brandon then explains that her mother is desperate, suffering immensely for not knowing her daughter's whereabouts. He emphasizes how dangerous it is for a child to go out alone on the streets, especially in such a large and busy city. With great care, Brandon takes Zoe to the car and settles her in the back seat. During the journey to the police station, the girl remains silent, lost in her own thoughts. Brandon, in turn, can't help but let his mind wander to his own past, so painfully similar to Zoe's. Brandon remembers how his father left, never to return, leaving him with an immense emptiness in his chest and a constant feeling of abandonment. Throughout his childhood and much of his adolescence, Brandon wondered what he had done wrong to deserve that rejection. His father's absence was especially painful on special occasions and school events, when he saw his classmates accompanied by their complete and loving families. After his father's departure, Brandon's mother was forced to work twice as hard to support the house and the two young children. She barely had time to attend school meetings or closely monitor the boys' growth. Brandon and his brother spent all day at daycare so that their mother could dedicate herself to work. When they arrived home, exhausted, it was already time for dinner and sleep, while their mother prepared the meals for the next day. Despite all the difficulties, Brandon remembers his mother's unconditional love and how she strived to be present, even if only on Sundays. It was on these special days that the family would gather to go for walks, ride bikes, and enjoy moments of relaxation. In the winter, his mother would set up a cozy cabin in the living room, prepare hot chocolate, and tell endless stories, transporting her children to a magical world where problems seemed distant and insignificant. Now, as an adult, Brandon can understand how overwhelmed his mother was, balancing work, household chores, and raising two young children, all without the support of a partner. And yet, she found the strength to be fully present in the moments she was with her children, as if nothing else mattered in the world besides that instant of connection and love. One day, Brandon's mother fell seriously ill. He caught her crying and praying fervently, begging God not to take her away, as her children still needed her. Brandon, frightened, asked where she was going. With tears in her eyes, his mother explained that she needed to take a long trip and that, during her absence, the boys would be in the care of their grandmother. Brandon, desperate, questioned whether his mother would also abandon them, just as his father had done. She then wrapped him in a tight hug and assured him that she would never leave them helpless. Even if physical distance separated them, the love that united them would be eternal and unbreakable. The mother taught her children that, whenever they missed her, they just had to close their eyes and imagine her warm embrace, because true love transcends time and space. A few days later, Brandon's mother passed away, a victim of advanced-stage lung cancer. She had received the diagnosis too late, and in just 3 months, the disease had consumed her completely. Brandon, at the age of 13, felt completely lost and helpless. The pain of loss was overwhelming, and he found himself immersed in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. For a long time, Brandon harbored a deep anger towards God, questioning his existence and his designs. How could a supposedly good and just being have allowed him to lose the two most important figures in his life in such a cruel and premature way? His grandmother took over the upbringing of the boys with all the love and dedication, and they never experienced material needs. However, nothing could fill the void left by the absence of their parents. It was only when he became a father that Brandon was able to reframe his story and find a new purpose for his life. His son brought a light that he never imagined possible, filling his heart in an overwhelming and transformative way. And now, upon hearing Zoe's story, all those painful memories resurfaced with an overwhelming force. Brandon parks the car in front of the police station and, looking in the rearview mirror, sees Zoe's mother standing on the sidewalk, her face streaked with tears and an expression of despair etched on her face. As soon as the girl sees her, she jumps out of the car and runs towards her, throwing herself into her arms. The mother, in tears, begs her daughter for forgiveness, saying that she loves her more than anything in the world and that those hours without knowing her whereabouts were the worst of her life. She explains that everything she said on the phone, on that fateful day, was just thoughtless words, uttered in a moment of extreme exhaustion. Zoe, with touching maturity, wipes away her mother's tears and says, "I know, Mommy. When adults are tired, they say things that hurt. But don't worry, Brandon already explained everything to me." At that moment, Zoe's mother turns to Brandon, her eyes welling with gratitude. She hugs him tightly, thanking him from the bottom of her heart for taking care of her little girl and bringing her back home safely. Brandon, moved, feels a wave of relief and happiness seeing mother and daughter finally reunited, wrapped in an embrace full of love and forgiveness. That scene is etched in Brandon's memory as a powerful reminder that love is capable of healing the deepest wounds and that, even in the darkest moments, there is always hope. He realizes that, just like Zoe, he too needs to face his own ghosts and seek help to reframe his painful past. Brandon says goodbye to Zoe and her mother, wishing them all the love and happiness in the world. He knows that the healing journey will be long for that family, but he is sure that, together, mother and daughter will find the necessary strength to overcome any obstacle. On the way back home, Brandon reflects on everything that happened that day. Zoe's story touched him in a profound and transformative way, making him see his own life from a new perspective. He realizes that, just like Zoe's mother, his own mother also faced immense challenges and, even so, never stopped loving him unconditionally. Brandon realizes that, to be the best father possible to his son, he first needs to take care of his own emotional wounds. He decides, at that moment, that he will seek professional help to deal with his traumatic past and find the inner peace he so longs for. Upon arriving home, Brandon hugs his son with all the love that overflows from his heart. He commits to always being present, to listening without judgment, and to loving without measure. Brandon knows that the healing journey will be long and challenging, but he is determined to break the cycle of pain and abandonment that marked his own childhood. Over time, Brandon finds in therapy a safe space to explore his deepest feelings and reframe his painful experiences. He learns to forgive his father and free himself from the weight of resentment he carried for so many years. Gradually, Brandon reconnects with his most authentic essence and discovers an inner strength he didn't know he possessed. Zoe's story becomes a watershed moment in Brandon's life. That chance encounter at the shopping mall awakens in him a new awareness of the importance of love, forgiveness, and genuine presence in the lives of those we love. Brandon becomes an even more dedicated and loving father, and his relationship with his son blossoms in a beautiful and transformative way. In the years that follow, Brandon follows Zoe and her mother's journey from afar. He learns that the two have started family therapy and are working hard to rebuild their relationship and heal the wounds of the past. With each new encounter, Brandon is moved to see the progress of that family and the strength of the love that unites them. Zoe and Brandon's story reminds us that, even in the most difficult moments, when everything seems lost and meaningless, there is always hope. It teaches us that love has the power to heal, transform, and reframe our lives, and that it's never too late to start over. If you liked this touching story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any exciting stories. Tell me here in the comments, what would you do if you found a child as needy as Zoe?